Master Your Mindset Radio, Episode 13.
Welcome to Master Your Mindset Radio, the show where we empower you to conquer limiting beliefs and transform your world with your gifting and purpose. Now for your host, Elizabeth Nader.
Hey friends, welcome back. Excited to talk to you today about something that has always inspired me, and those are the writings of Napoleon Hill. Now, if you read my book, Master Your Mindset, The Master's Way, you'll recognize the fact that I use a lot of his principles and ideas in my book to set forth the main concept in the beginning that the only thing we have control over is our mind and the way that we direct it. And, his inspiration for me is very foundational to all the work that I do, as he is the foundation of really any self-help guru that came after him. Really anybody in the self-help industry, especially those somehow that bring spirituality into it, can tie themselves back to a lot of the groundbreaking ideas of Napoleon Hill. And I was especially interested in him because of my father, who also, if you read the book, you'll know that he was a voracious reader and an advocate of all things mindset and always trying to bring himself up to the next level and really think about how he could be more successful and reach more people in his life. So Napoleon Hill has always been a big figure to me, so I was really happy to include him in the book. And I use his envelope idea, envelope 1 and envelope 2 in the book, which I'm not going to tell you about because you got to get the book and read about that. But today I wanted to talk about just very, very shortly, because we could go into each one of these, but I wanted to go over his 17 principles of personal achievement. And the reason why is, as we get closer to the end of the year, I started thinking about the areas in my life, in my work, in my family that I want to take to the next level, where I want to improve, where I want to reach more. And of course, that's the natural thing we think about as New Year's comes along, but I start thinking about it now because I want to start doing the work now. It's something that honestly I think about 12 months out of the year, but I like to start to put together a framework for me to identify what my really top few focus areas will be for the coming year in the different parts of my life. So I pulled out his writings again, as I often do, and I was starting to dig into the 17 principles of personal achievement and sharing them with my children. I thought, okay, well, let's go over them real quickly in a podcast, and maybe in future podcasts I will develop each one of those more specifically. But you're certainly free to read about them in his books. He introduces them first, I think, in Think and Grow Rich, which came out in 1937. Interestingly enough, he credits Andrew Carnegie, who's a wealthy businessman and philanthropist from that era, in pushing him to write all of this self-help stuff. But the real interesting fact behind all of this is I believe everything happens for a reason, and I really think that God had given him this message at a time when our country desperately needed to hear about positive thinking and positive mental attitudes and how to improve themselves and, the principles of success. Because if you think about what was going on in 1937, what had been going on for the better part of that decade was the Great Depression, and it touched everyone, and it was difficult, and it was all-consuming, and it was scary, and people lost fortunes, but even just the everyday man lost everything. We had soup lines. The government had to get involved and help people. And it was a traumatic, traumatic time in our nation's history that touched really everyone in some way. So coming out with these ideas about how to better yourself and give yourself hope and tying them, even spiritually at that time was needed. So I really believe he was there for such a time as this, which I think is fascinating. So if you want to get into more of his writings, Think and Grow Rich from that time, and then he actually came out with a book after that gets into really a lot more detail about the 17 principles. So let's just look at a few of them, and just to give you some inspiration here to dig further if you want. So as I talk about these, the way he lists them, remember, we're talking the 30s. He was a very formal writer, so everything he says in his videos are old videos from back then. a few years later, but old videos from back then. And his writings are kind of stilted for us today, not as casually written. He definitely uses more formal language, but it's very effective. And so let me go through what his 17 are, and let's talk about them just a little bit to give you some motivation to start to think about where you can take yourself to the next level, which areas you want to work on and focus on. So the first one is definiteness of purpose. So that's where everything begins. Purpose and a plan. We have to have a plan, and we have to have an idea of what our purpose is. I talk about that a lot. I talk about that in my book, is finding your purpose, defining purpose. And you need to do that work. Some of you know what it is. Others are just beginning to try to figure that out. But we are all definitely given gifts, which we are to develop into talents by working on them. And those talents then point us to our purpose, which then, once we pursue that, takes us to our destiny. So without that, the rest of it is sort of meaningless. So definitely it's obvious that number one is definiteness of purpose. And that's something that if you have in hand, awesome. And it tends to grow and it tends to get more granular as time goes on. But if you don't know what that is yet, do the work to figure that out. I have some ideas for you in my book how to do that, and we'll talk about that in another podcast. But the first thing is to really focus on what your purpose and plan is in your life so that you have a direction and a focus. The next principle of success is what he calls mastermind alliance. And this is really a biblical principle because he's talking about two or more minds working in harmony for the attainment of an objective. And you think about that verse in the Bible that says, wherever two are gathered, if two ask in my name, it shall be granted to them. And there's a lot of focus on, two or more, or wisdom in a multitude of counselors, things like that. So the principle number two to success is that you have people that help you, that get together, you talk to, kind of like what I said in my podcast last 2 weeks ago, which was having your personal board of directors. This is about masterminding. This is about getting together with those people that you allow to influence your life and trying to focus on an objective and figure out how to get there. So you have to have the cooperation of others in your life to succeed. We don't do it alone. The third principle he calls applied faith. And for me, what this really means is it's a state of mind that we operate in faith that we apply, meaning we act through faith. We just don't have passive faith. We have faith that we put in action. And I would really say to you as well that that is also the decision to operate out of a state of faith rather than out of a state of fear. So we're operating, notice we're not just sitting idly by in faith, but we're operating, which is a verb, which is action. We are operating in faith. And that is principle number 3. Faith without works is dead. Faith without works goes nowhere. So get out of fear, get into faith, but begin to step forward in that. His fourth principle of success out of the 17, he calls going the extra mile. And this is where he brings in what is called the law of compensation. And, going the extra mile is all about being that person that stands out in a crowd, being that person that in an organization, in a group, in your job, you're always willing to go the extra mile. You're willing to serve more, to serve better. You're willing to do something that shows that you are committed. And whenever you do that, the law of compensation, which is really like, sowing and reaping, comes into play. And eventually you get noticed for that. And eventually then your ability to serve more, it expands because you're given more responsibility, or people give you more favor. People notice that you're willing to go the extra mile. So the principle number 4 is really about expanding what you do and really about committing to being that person that's willing to go above and beyond. Principle number 5 is what he calls pleasing personality. See, his language is a little dated, but it's interesting how he wrote this. And what he's really saying is that you consider what your personality looks like to others. So what is personality? It's the sum of everything. It's your mind, your spirituality, your physical traits, your habits, the things that distinguish you from other people, the way that you present yourself. Your personality is sort of the way that you are packaged. I would say that it even runs into what your personal brand is, which, we talk about that in the book, Developing a Personal Brand. And all of that needs to be genuine. It needs to be unique. And it is unique because you are the only person who is like you. But you need to focus on those things that you know that make you who you are. And is your personality pleasing? Now, you don't want to change the core of who you are, but listen, if you have a sour look on your face all the time, you may want to consider changing that. If you tend to be negative in your speech, if you tend to approach things from a point of negativity, glass half empty instead of glass half full, the way that you speak to others, the way that you behave, the way that you dress, you have to consider the full package. And this, again, is not about being fake. This is about being genuine and true to yourself. And we are all created with wonderful, pleasing traits. And it's about putting those best traits forward. So he talks about lesson number 5, your pleasing personality. This actually, as you go through this, it starts to sound like you're preparing yourself for a job interview. And I guess that's not that far off, since life is pretty much one big job interview. Lesson number 6, or I should say what principle number 6, is personal initiative. Now, this is about the power you put behind in the action that you take. This is about doing your own thinking. This is about courage to act on your own. This is about stepping out. Initiative is something we are losing in the generations coming up because we have parents who, out of the kindness of their heart and such a desire to do well, have inadvertently caused an environment for their children where personal initiative is no longer required. It's, well, I'm going to help you do that project. I'm going to help you make sure you get a good grade. I'm going to make sure you get into this college, rather than saying to our children, you need to take the initiative. I'm looking for you to do it, and you succeed or you fail based on your own personal initiative. But this is really important. And it's not just for people that want to go into some big career in sales where you have to step out and cold call people and do things that people always associate with initiative as that career. It's for everyone. It's the ability to advocate for yourself. It's ability to step up, step out, stand up and say, I need to be heard. It's taking the action. It's not sitting around thinking about it. It's being inspired to take the action. Everything requires that you start somewhere. Everything that is worth achieving starts with a small step. Do you need to start taking more personal initiative? That's why we're going through this list. We're thinking about the areas in which we need improvement and what we can do next year or now, but develop a plan for next year of how we can improve in those areas and focus in those areas. Number 7 is positive mental attitude. And I think that speaks for itself. We talk so much about we cannot control anything except the way that we react, except our mind, how we look at things, how we decide to react to things. That is the only thing that is in your control. And if it's positive, you will also attract more people to you. You will attract more opportunities. Positivism attracts positivism, and failure attracts failure. So positive mental attitude is very important. You can see how I could do an entire hour-long podcast on each one of these, but today I just want to give you the 17. Number 8 is enthusiasm, and he says this as faith in action. Enthusiasm is faith in action, because when you are in faith, when are you walking in faith, thinking in faith, it is exciting. You tend to have more energy. And so enthusiasm obviously brings things to life. And people see that in you. They hear it in your voice. They see it on your face. And it really makes all the difference. Number 9 is self-discipline. So this is extremely important. I think last week I posted in our private group about what appetite do you need to get under control? What discipline do you need to develop in order to really experience your purpose, in order to overcome limiting beliefs? Self-discipline is everything. If you can't control your thoughts, you can't control your needs, you really cannot control anything in your life. You have to start with controlling and mastering your thoughts, because we know out of that flows everything. Out of the thoughts flow your words. Out of your words flow your actions. And in there are your emotions and your feelings that are all dictated by the thoughts that you have. Self-discipline requires that you balance your emotions in your heart and that you take control over the thoughts in your head. And they are yours and yours alone to decide what they are. So that is another core principle. Number 10 is accurate thinking. That's what he calls it, accurate thinking. And I think this is related to self-discipline in how I talked about it, because this again is the power of thought. So I would say instead of accurate thinking, I might call it believing truth. Getting rid of lies and believing truth, because accurate thinking implies that you are believing the truth, that you are seeking truth, and that you are telling yourself things that are true. In today's world, truth is hard to come by. It's at a premium. There's a lot of fake news out there, and that's not just politics, it's everywhere. Even things that we believe about ourselves, that we're told about ourselves. So accurate thinking really implies that the power that you have in your brain to think the way that you think affects everything in your life. So believe, speak, and think about things that are true. Find the truth, because there's power in truth. Number 11 is Napoleon Hill calls it controlled attention. And what he says is controlled attention leads to mastery in any type of human endeavor. So this is focus. That's what this is, the ability to focus. You can see that's also related to self-discipline. Now, ability to focus is so much more difficult in 2019 than it was in 1937 when he wrote this. We all know that. We are bombarded constantly by ideas and opportunities and voices and images and things that for us to do at all times. We're constantly multitasking. We're constantly looking for different stimulation, and without even asking for it, actually it's coming after us, right? So the ability to master our attention and focus on one thing when necessary is powerful. I would say to all of us need to improve in this area, and we need to be disciplined about it, because it does make a difference. It helps us get to our goals that much more quickly and effectively. Number 12 in his principles of success is teamwork. And this is something that, again, relates to the idea that we don't achieve success on our own. We need to have what he calls harmonious cooperation with others, and that it's important that it's part of what you do, the spirit of teamwork. I think when you have the idea and knowledge and understanding that you don't go it alone in life, not only do you look for the teamwork opportunities, but you're also that much more willing to give to others, because you know that others then will also give to you, and that this is something that becomes a, you reap what you sow situation. But teamwork is something that you either have a spirit of it or you don't. People see really very quickly through that. If you try to pretend like you want to be a good member of a team, or if you really honestly, truly, and in a genuine way want to engage in teamwork. So that is for primarily, I think, in careers and businesses, but it's also, in situations of charity work and other places where you're working with a group of people. Are you able to work with a team? And again, this is something that makes you a more valuable asset. The 13th success principle he calls adversity and defeat. So this is about failure. How do you look at failure? I wrote a whole chapter called The Blessing of Failure. And we need to change our mindset about failure. We need to see that failures are more often than not a blessing in disguise. In fact, I would argue that they pretty much all are. But that's our choice, right? It's how we decide to look at it. It's really just a temporary defeat if you look at it correctly. It's not final. But that's our choice. It's not what happens to us. It's how we decide to react to it that makes a difference. So we have to have this success principle that says failure is okay. Now, repeated failure, the same failure, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, that's not okay. But the failure that we experience in life, the things that happen to us, the things that we try and we fail, we can learn from that. It's what I say to my kids, you either succeed or you learn. Really, failure is not there, it's learning. And within failure, there is a seed of success. If you choose to sow that seed, most definitely some of the best success in life comes out of failure. So that's an important attitude to have. It's an important mindset to develop in order to live a successful and victorious life. Number 14 in the success principles is creative vision. And the way Napoleon Hill says this, he says creative vision is developed by the free and fearless use of one's imagination. So this is where, we throw out the rules, we throw out the boundaries, and we trust ourselves, and we allow God to speak to us. We allow our minds to do what they were formed to do, which is to come up with unique ideas, inspirations, inventions, whatever it is. Have a vision, create a vision. My people perish for lack of vision. We need vision. It's important to do that. It's important to write a vision for your life, write a vision for the week, write a vision for next year, whatever it is. Have the vision, be creative. Allow your mind to go in areas that may be a little uncomfortable, maybe a little bit scary because you're not sure if that creative idea will work. But that's where the best ideas come, is from an imagination that is developed and allowed to the freedom of coming up with unique ideas and really being fearless about it. Kind of like kids are. Kids don't have any rules about their imagination until we tell them they have to. And that's a reality. That's why kids are so free until the world says, oh, these are your boundaries, which is really a shame. Number 15 in the success principles is health. So again, as I always say, spirit, soul, and body, we have to balance the three of them. You have to consider doing something every day for each of those. What did you do for your spirit today? What did you do for your soul, which is your mind? What did you do for your body? So health, sound health. Without that, what else can we do? You have to be aware of your body and your status of your health. You have to be aware of what you eat. What we eat affects the way we feel, affects the way we think, affects our ability to get done, which we want to get done. It's all connected. And I think we all know that, but we tend to operate sometimes day to day as though that's not true, as though that we can put anything into our body and not pay a price. But that's not true, is it? There's always a price to pay. And these days, with a food supply that's really been, in a lot of ways, messed with, it's that much harder. The expense of getting natural organic food, whatever, it's that much harder. The ability to find natural cures, it's that much harder. Yes, it's difficult, but it's there. And you need to focus on what you can do to keep yourself in the best state of health possible. And sometimes we have to think ourselves well. It's all related. Don't disconnect the spirit, soul, and body from each other, because they each affect the other. Spiritual health is directly related to physical health, is directly related to mental health. Number 16 on the success principles is budgeting time and money. And, those are our resources. Time, I would say, is the most precious resource, because you can never create more time. You can create more money. I would say that's number 2. But time, once it's gone, it's gone. You can't recreate it. And so we need to think about it as a gift. We need to think about the time we've been given as a gift. Not to say that we can't ever relax, we can't ever do anything fun, we can't go on vacation, we can't, that's of course silly. We need to do all those things, rest and relaxation. We need to know our limits, and we need to be balanced. But many of us can do a better job of budgeting our time and being really a good steward of the time we've been given. I think that's something that you never stop trying to improve upon. And, it's true also with money. We need to be a good steward of the money that we've been given. And money is a mindset thing, first and foremost. If you need to fix your money situation, start on the inside. Start with your mindset. I did a chapter on it. It's really all about fixing that first. And I think it's important that you deal with all of that before you try to make more money. Because if you don't have a healthy view of money, no matter how much you make, it won't make a difference in your life. And here's a question for you. Is your money working for you, or are you working for money? We say that really easily. There's a song, She Works Hard for the Money. Everybody knows that song, but we say, we're working for the money. Why isn't our money working for us? Something to consider. It's a mindset shift. And 17, the last one that Napoleon Hill lists, is habits. Developing and establishing positive habits. And this, of course, is related to definitely spirit, soul, and body. And I would say to you, it would be good to review the habits that you have for all three of those areas of your life. What do you do on a daily basis to establish more positive habits? What are you doing for your mind on a daily basis? What are you doing for your spirit? What are you doing for your body? Establishing good habits is related to self-discipline, which of course is its own success principle. So those are the 17 principles of success. Again, there's so much more about them. They're all interrelated. I could do an hour-long podcast or more on each one of them. There is just a wealth of information. But as much as this is coming from the 1930s, some things just never change. The wisdom in his writings and the wisdom that God gave him to really kick off this, so far century plus of self-help work and spiritual work and getting people to understand themselves is incredibly beneficial. So if you're interested in him and want to look more into his writings, I can definitely point you to a few things that are really, really helpful. But I thought that might give you a leg up on New Year's. I know it's only November, but start to think about, do an analysis of where you are in all those areas. Set some goals for yourself. You'd be shocked if you have the right attitude and start to develop specific things that you want to do on a daily basis. It's amazing how our lives can change. Anything is possible if you decide and put your mind to it and you employ these success principles. So guys, have a great week. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, make sure you do that so that you don't miss any weekly episode. And, it would be great if you could post a review. That's so helpful for me to see what you think. Send me an email. Go to my website, elizabethnader.com, and there you can find the links to my social media and the links to the private, free Facebook community for more daily content and inspiration. And don't forget to get the book on Amazon, Master Your Mindset the Master's Way. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for listening to Master Your Mindset Radio. Before you go, if you want to be part of a free online community of like-minded individuals for support, resources, and inspiration as you conquer your limiting beliefs and pursue your purpose, go to elizabethnader.com/community. That's elizabethnader.com/community, or search for Master Your Mindset Academy private group on Facebook. Looking forward to seeing you online.